So in this first chapter, we're going to try to answer the question, what is time? This is, of course, one of the hardest questions that you can tackle in the whole of philosophy. So the first step is, let's attempt to define time. One way you can think of doing it is, usually you think of time, okay, but what are the consequences of time? Well, you can say, well, I can see time when I see things change. So I have, one configuration that then goes into another type of configuration. Or you can look at it from a motion point of view, from physics, movement. So, if I have a field here and I have a ball, then the ball suddenly moves here to another point in space. So change and motion. However, there is a circular requirement, because then if I try to define change and I try to define motion, then I require the concept of time itself to actually properly define them. And there's a second problem with trying to define time through change or motion, which is the problem that in some cases, and this is self-evident, time might go by without change and without motion. So it's a little bit difficult just to pinpoint one-on-one that time is change or time is motion. So this equivalence that you can think of, time equivalent to change in general, you can say that it's not true. And that actually, in order to define change or define motion in any given system, you need time. So this first approach, kind of like fails. So we're not going to go down that route. Call it A. What would be an option B? Or, well, that's a definition. Let's further explore time. So usually when you think of time, you go and you say, well, there's past, present, and future. And there's always the past time, the present time, what's happening right now, and future time, what's about to happen. And I would have two observations. First of all, you're not trying to define time. Time is not past, present, and future. Those seems to be attributes of time, characteristics, way to describe certain components of the concept of time. It's not that you can say time is only the past, time is the future, time is the present. These are attributes of time. Um, and of course, there's always the question, the persistent question of, is the past real? Is the present time the only thing that exists? Is the future predefined or uncertain? But none of these things actually help us define what is time. So as we go through the exploration of the philosophy of time, we always need to bear in mind that this is a fundamental attribute of time. Somehow, one way or another, we need to deal with that. And as we define time, as we try to comprehend what time is, this will always be here. So I would call this an attribute that we need to deal with, and is unescapable, at least from an ordinary perspective. Then you would go and you say, okay, see, well, but hang on a second. We got something that is called a clock, right? And a clock could mean many different things. And you can have like physical clocks where you put two mirrors and you have a beam of light going back and forth, or you can have a mechanical clock. But the concept of a clock measures time. A clock is what allows you to quantify the passage of time. In a certain way, it's related to past, present, and future. But again, a clock is a device that number one, it measures a form of change in a certain way. And in point number two, it kind of like gives a quantification to this phenomenon of time, but it is not time. And what we call the measurement of time, that is probably a good enough definition at this point in time, but doesn't allow us to understand what time is. So we would need to say that a clock is a device that somehow is directly characterizes time and gives a quantified view of time, whatever time is, but doesn't allow us or help us in the definition of this concept of time. What is the substance of time? Then another thought is, okay, we've been